She brought me soup for support, but inside my refrigerator, I found the exact same pot, with a stranger's note tucked inside. The heavy enamel lid clanged as Bella set it down on my kitchen counter, the sharp, metallic sound slicing through the quiet apartment like a starter pistol. The air instantly filled with the thick, greasy scent of chicken broth mixed with her expensive perfume, a fragrance that had always struck me as too sweet, too cloying, like flowers in a poorly ventilated hospital room. Bella offered that specific smile she reserved for family photo shoots, corners of the mouth turned up, but the eyes holding a cold, scanning emptiness, evaluating every speck of dust on my floor. She said she had made this soup especially for me to fortify my system after everything that had happened, her voice soft and almost hypnotic, wrapping me in a sticky web of faux concern. I thanked her, feeling my insides knot with humiliation. Accepting help from my brother's wife, who had always viewed me as a failure, felt like admitting total defeat. She left, her heels clicking against the laminate, leaving me alone with a pot that looked strangely familiar, like a ghost from a past life returned to remind me of something important. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, I leaned on my crutch and hobbled to the fridge to hide this Trojan horse. Leaving food out on the counter would violate my manic sense of order, the only thing I could still control. I opened the door, and the harsh refrigerator light hit my eyes, illuminating the half-empty shelves, a carton of kefir, a piece of dried-out cheese, and a solitary apple, a still life of my financial collapse and loneliness. I shoved the kefir aside to make room and suddenly froze, the hand holding the pot trembling traitorously, nearly spilling the hot contents onto my bare feet. On the bottom shelf, pushed all the way to the back, sat an identical pot, with the same pale blue cornflowers on the side and the same chipped enamel on the handle that I remembered from my mother's kitchen. But the horror wasn't in the matching cookware, it was the puzzle that instantly snapped together in my mind. I had given that pot to Bella and Owen 3 years ago when they moved, and I hadn't seen it since. Why did she bring me soup in a pot I thought was lost in the abyss of their perfect suburban home, and why did she lie, claiming she bought a new one just for this occasion? With shaking fingers, I lifted the lid of the first pot, the one Bella had just delivered. Steam hit my face, but through the mist, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat and then flutter in my throat like a trapped bird. Inside, floating in the greasy broth, lay a small square of thick paper, folded in 4 and sealed in a clear plastic baggie, like a message in a bottle cast into an ocean of chicken fat. I fished it out, ignoring the burn on my fingers, and unwrapped the wet plastic, feeling reality begin to fray at the seams. On the paper, in a sprawling, unfamiliar hand, were just 3 words: "Eat up, tigress." D. The phrase hit me harder than any physical pain I had endured in recent months. Who was D? And why did he call my sister-in-law Tigress, a nickname that clashed violently with her image as a pious mother and my brother's faithful wife? And most importantly, why was this soup, which she had presented as her own culinary feat, clearly the leftovers of someone else's intimate meal? I stood in the middle of the kitchen, clutching the slippery little bag, and felt bile rise in my throat, not from the smell of the food, but from the sudden realization of the role I had been cast in. Bella hadn't just brought me food, she was using my refrigerator, my apartment, and my destitute state as a garbage disposal for the evidence of her secret life, confident that I, pathetic and crushed, would simply swallow it without asking questions. She considered me so insignificant that she hadn't even bothered to check the pot before dumping it on me like a bone to a dog. I remembered how she had looked at me 5 minutes ago, with pity mixed with disgust, and now I realized that behind that look wasn't sympathy, but the cold calculation of a predator covering her tracks. My brother, Owen, worked 12-hour days to provide her with that lifestyle, and she was feeding me her lover's scraps, turning me into an accomplice to a crime I didn't even know was being committed. That evening, Owen stopped by. He looked gray and haggard, as if his life force was leaking out of him drop by drop to fuel the perfect facade Bella had built. He brought bags of groceries, grains, pasta, tea, a basic survival kit I couldn't afford after my layoff and injury, and every movement he made was steeped in exhaustion and guilt. I watched him from my stool, feeling a rage boil up inside me, hot and sharp, but I forced myself to smile and ask about his day, trying not to betray what I knew. Bella was at the stove all day, he said as he unpacked the bags, his voice sounding proud but laced with a hint of confusion. She said she made you her signature soup, even though I haven't seen it at home in 6 months. Those words were the final nail. She wasn't cooking at home. She was bringing me homemade food to create an alibi for her absence, hiding behind charity for her invalid sister-in-law. I decided to test my theory, a plan born of desperation and anger that required acting skills I never possessed in real life. I pulled out my phone and opened Bella's social media, scrolling through the feed of her perfect life: yoga, brunches with girlfriends, bouquets of flowers with no signature posted in her stories with cryptic emojis. In a photo from 3 weeks ago, I noticed a tiny detail in the background: the edge of a restaurant table where a man's hand rested, wearing a massive watch that definitely didn't belong to Owen. Owen had thin wrists and wore an old fitness tracker. This was the hand of a man used to taking what he wanted, the hand of the very D, who fed her soup and called her tigress. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred, trying to make out the watch face or the shirt cuff, but the image dissolved, leaving me with nothing but guesses and growing paranoia. The next day, Bella came again, this time with a container of lasagna. I greeted her from the armchair, trying to look as pathetic and grateful as possible to lower her defenses. "How was the soup, darling?" she sang, placing the container on the table without even looking at me. "I hope you're feeling better. It's full of healthy herbs." I told her it was the best soup of my life and watched her reaction closely. The corner of her mouth twitched in a barely perceptible smirk, as if she were relishing how easily she had played me. She didn't know I had poured the soup down the toilet, after photographing the contents and the note, and scrubbed the pot until it squeaked, hiding it in the cupboard as physical evidence. I asked for the recipe, claiming I wanted to learn to cook just like her when I recovered, and I saw panic flash in her eyes, just for a second, before she started babbling nonsense about grandmother's secrets and special spices from the market. When she left, I cracked open the lasagna container, already knowing I'd find confirmation of my suspicions, my hands shaking from a mix of fear and the thrill of the hunt. At the bottom, under a layer of bechamel sauce, I found not a note, but a scrap of foil with a sticker they had evidently forgotten to peel off during reheating: Trattoria di Mario, Table 5 reservation, 1930. This wasn't a home-cooked meal. These were the remains of a restaurant dinner, repackaged in Tupperware to create an illusion of care. I checked the restaurant's address. It was on the other side of the city, in an elite residential complex where the rent for an apartment cost more than I made in a year. Bella wasn't just cheating on my brother, she was living a second life full of luxury and passion while Owen broke his back paying off her credit cards, and I was finishing the leftovers from their table of love. I began to dig deeper, using all the free time I now had in abundance, turning my apartment into a war room where the walls were draped in invisible threads of connection. I recalled Owen complaining about strange charges on their joint account, which Bella explained away as personal growth courses and help for some mythical friend in trouble. Now I realized that the friend was her lover, or worse, she was renting an apartment for their trysts using her husband's money, turning betrayal into a sophisticated form of financial parasitism. I felt dirty, as if I had bathed in a sewer, but that filth gave me strength, transforming my helplessness into a cold weapon of retribution. 2 days later, I called the restaurant, posing as Bella's assistant who had supposedly lost a receipt for expense reporting, and asked to clarify the details of the order from that evening. The voice on the other end was polite and helpful. Yes, of course, the table was reserved under David Arakelian, a regular client. The bill was paid with a card. 1 second, the card of your boss, Mrs. Bella. The ground fell out from under me. She wasn't just accepting courtship, she was supporting him, or at least funding their entertainment with my brother's money. David. There he was, the mysterious D. I found his profile online in 10 minutes, a fitness trainer, young, with glossy skin and a smug smile, at least 7 years younger than Bella. I decided it was time to act, but a direct confrontation would be a mistake. Bella was too cunning. She would twist everything to make me look like a crazy, hysterical woman jealous of her happiness. I needed to back her into a corner, force her to make the mistake herself, and reveal her hand to Owen in a way that left him no room to close his eyes to the truth. I called Owen and asked him to come over for dinner on the weekend, saying I wanted to thank them for their care and that I would cook myself, despite my bad leg. He initially refused, not wanting to burden me, but I insisted, saying it was important for my psychological recovery. Soft-hearted and kind, he agreed. On the day of the dinner, I ordered delivery from the exact same place, Trattoria di Mario, selecting the most expensive items on the menu and draining the last of my credit card limit. I asked the courier to deliver the food in its original packaging, and I arranged the beautiful, branded boxes right on the kitchen table, making no attempt to pass them off as my own. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath, looking at my reflection in the hallway mirror, pale, with dark circles under my eyes, but with a feverish glint in my gaze. I was ready for the final act of this drama. Bella entered first, carrying yet another container, and her eyes immediately landed on the table covered in food from her favorite secret hideaway. She froze, and I watched the color drain from her face, turning her perfect makeup into the lifeless mask of a porcelain doll. "Oh, you ordered food?" she asked, her voice cracking into a high-pitched squeak. "Why spend so much, Eve?" I cut her off, smiling so widely my cheekbones hurt. "I decided you deserved better than my attempts at cooking. Besides, I heard this is your friend David's favorite restaurant. I thought you'd appreciate it." Owen, who had just walked in behind her and was taking off his jacket, froze with one arm still in a sleeve, not understanding what was happening but feeling the tension thickening in the air. "What David?" he asked, looking from me to his wife. "Bella, who is she talking about?" Bella tried to laugh, but the sound came out like the bark of a sick dog. "Don't listen to her, Owen. She's confused. It's probably her medication. Eve, you need to lie down." She stepped toward me, reaching out as if to hit me or shut me up, but I stepped back, leaning on my crutch, and played my ace. I pulled the little bag with the note, "Eat up, tigress." From my pocket and placed it next to the steaming lasagna, right under Owen's nose. "This was in the soup Bella brought me on Tuesday," I said, looking my brother straight in the eye. "In the very same pot you two supposedly lost during the move. And here is the statement from your account, Owen, showing that you paid for this dinner, and a dozen others just like it, while you thought your wife was at personal growth courses." I tossed down the printouts I had made the day before, having guessed the password to his online banking, which, in his simplicity, he had never changed. Silence hung in the room, so dense and heavy it felt like it could be sliced with the knife we had intended for the lasagna. Owen slowly picked up the note, read it, then looked at the receipt, then at Bella. In his eyes, I saw an entire world collapsing, the breaking of faith in a person with whom he had shared a bed for 5 years. Bella stood silent, her chest heaving like a cornered animal. In that moment, she truly did look like a tigress, not graceful and strong, but trapped in a snare, ready to gnaw off her own paw. "Is this a joke?" Owen whispered, his voice so quiet I had to strain to hear. "You fed my sister your lover's leftovers?" The question wasn't about the money, or the sex, but about the specific depth of humiliation that is impossible to forgive, the fact that she had dragged his family through the dirt. Bella suddenly exploded, her face twisted in rage. "Because you are both losers. You, with your boring job and eternal exhaustion, and her, the perpetual victim, a leech sucking the life out of us. David is a man, he makes me feel alive, not like a nursemaid to 2 invalids." She screamed, spitting the words, pouring out everything that had festered for years under her mask of virtue, and every word only confirmed I was right, freeing Owen from his illusions. I remained silent, feeling a strange calm, as if the storm that had raged inside me for a week had suddenly settled, leaving behind a clean, washed shore. Owen silently walked to the door, threw it wide open, and said one word, hard and final as a judge's gavel, "Out." Bella faltered, looked at him, then at me, grabbed her bag, and ran out without even trying to gather her things or make an excuse. We were left alone amidst the cooling food and scattered papers, the sound of the slamming door hanging in the air like the echo of a demolished life. Owen sat on a chair, buried his face in his hands, and his shoulders shook with soundless, terrible male sobbing. I walked over and hugged his shoulders, smelling his cologne mixed with the scent of stress and sweat, and I knew that we were both free now, even if we had paid a terrible price for it. We didn't touch the food that night, we just sat drinking tea, staring silently into the darkness of the window, where the lights of the big city burned, hiding thousands of stories just like ours. 4 months have passed, and the snow outside the window has given way to the first timid greenery. My leg has almost healed, reminding me of the injury only with a dull ache before it rains. Owen divorced her quickly and ruthlessly, leaving Bella with nothing but her personal items and the debts she had racked up in her own name trying to keep David, who, of course, vanished the moment the cash flow dried up. I found a new job, a remote one, which allows me to avoid office politics and dedicate more time to myself and my brother, who is slowly beginning to come back to life. Yesterday, I made soup, real chicken soup with homemade noodles, and when the aroma filled the kitchen, I felt no nausea, only warmth and comfort. I took that same pot with the cornflowers out of the cupboard, scrubbed clean of someone else's filth, and poured the fresh broth into it, golden and clear as a teardrop. Now it was just cookware, an old object with a history that no longer held power over me because I had rewritten its meaning. I put the lid on, smiled at my reflection in the enamel, and thought that sometimes, to start a new life, you just need to look in the fridge and find something that makes you throw out all the trash, both from your house and from your head. Support isn't leftovers from a stranger's table, it's the ability to make your own soup when the world is falling apart, and to feed it to someone who truly deserves it.